a fist, you thump it on the ground next to the computer and say, "Your mother was a toaster."
It's interesting because there you go.
Now, can I just hit the down arrow to move to the next screen?
There you go.
All right, we're going to talk about how to build a Seaboard Airline Railway Class B3 boxcar from scratch. It's pretty much generic as a boxcar goes, which fits my my interest the best. My feeling is the more ordinary it is, the better. And so let's take a look at a few things. A little bit of background to understand why I got into this little project. Like many of you, I was a Lionel guy growing up. We had a pretty extensive Lionel system in the attic. And but as much as a model railroader, I've always been interested in the one-to-one scale. And so got a little critical of the Lionel train set going around curves like streetcars, and the fact that their level of accuracy was not what I came to appreciate. And so I decided I wanted to go into HO. Well, as a young kid, we got Lionel stuff underneath the Christmas tree. When I said I wanted to go into HO, basically my dad said, "Hey, we invested in all this Lionel. If you're going to go into HO, you got to do it yourself." And on a budget for mowing people's lawns, there wasn't a lot of money to spend on it. So I had to figure out how to build my own stuff myself. And the car on the top of the picture was the first scratch built project I did in 1958 when I was 14 years old. And it still runs today. And going to the bottom of the screen, that's a Silver Streak model. A lot of you, I think, here built Silver Streak models in years gone by. How many of you have built a Silver Streak model? Yeah, a fair number. That's how we used to do it. But it's certainly good practice if you want to do scratch building. It's a very similar technique to was used on the Silver Streak kits as was used to build the Seaboard B3 boxcar. And if you ever want to try one out, I really recommend it. You can still find them on eBay. If you like late steam era, early diesel area, go on eBay and buy yourself a Silver Streak kit. You'll enjoy it. But let's talk about the car we're going to do tonight. It's a Seaboard Class B3 boxcar. They were built in 1920 by the Pressed Steel Car Corporation, and there was 1,000 of them made. And their road numbers were 12,000 to 12,999. The model, this is the model car for this particular project, and it's 12,196. But they were all, as near as I could tell, they were all almost identical. During its lifespan, it was converted to a Type AB brake system, and it got the Ajax brake wheel rather than the vertical staff brake wheel that it was built with. But it still has Andrews trucks on it. They were worn out by the end of World War II, and the Seaboard Railroad did not re-letter them. As many of you may know, the Seaboard was in bankruptcy. They overextended themselves building the Miami extension and ended up in bankruptcy. They emerged from bankruptcy in 1946. And when a company emerges from bankruptcy, it is essentially reorganized. So the company was renamed from Seaboard Airline Railway to Seaboard Airline Railroad. And I don't know if you can read it on this car, but the old logo on here still says Railway. There's a side view of the car, and I've laid out the dimensions of it. This car has never been modeled commercially. So that's another good reason to build one from scratch. So it turns out that this is really a really good late steam to early diesel transition era model. Well, if you're going to scratch build a car, there's two things you need to know. One, you don't do it overnight. And two, it's not cheap. You can buy the upscale version from Scale Trains or other suppliers like that. And if they made this car, it would cost a lot less than it would cost you to make it yourself. So if that's the case, why do it? Well, the payoff is that you've got something pretty or something nice you can bring and brag, and you've got the satisfaction of saying, I did this myself. So that is a good reason to start this. The other thing is when you start buying things, oftentimes when you buy a part, you get more than one. You get a package of 5 or a package of 10. So there is some economy of scale to be had. If you undertake a project like that, build 2 or 3. And unit costs will definitely go down. The other thing is make a kit. Gather all your parts now before you start to build, because once you start building and you get to a certain point, and now you're really into it, you're ready to put that next part on or to do that next stage, and you haven't got the part. And that's frustrating. And sometimes when that happens, you don't pick it up again for a year and a half. So make yourself a kit, because sometimes it takes a while to find and obtain the parts you need before you can start. But avoid the frustration of an interruption once you get going. The other thing is, and I hope as we build this car, you'll see it. Plan how you're going to build this, and plan the order in which you're going to assemble things. I'll just give you one example. The staff for the brake wheel fits over the coupler release bar. So if you would put that staff in first, then the coupler release bar won't go in like it's supposed to. So that's just one example, and there are many once you undergo a project like this one. And of course, let's go ahead and get started with it. And the first thing is to measure and cut the wooden parts. And while the parts are flat, there's a couple of things you can do. One is mark off the locations of pieces that are going on there. Do it at that time while it's flat, and you can rule it out more accurately. And also drill pilot holes where you're going to have holes while it's laying flat. You have a little bit better precision in locating in your hole, and you'll finish those holes later. This is how the basic body is built. It looks like this. Basically, the roof, 2 ends, and a floor. And this roof comes from Northeastern Scale Models. And they call it HO inner roof. It's literally what their catalog number is. And there are other roof cross sections you can get from them, but this is the best roof you can get. Otherwise, you may or may not have the resources yourself to make the slants on the side of the roof. And the other thing is, to make this strong, I used Elmer's wood glue because it's wood on wood. And that's a very, very difficult bond to break once it's there. But it's got to be square. If it's not square, you're going to have a Pablo Picasso freight car. And I actually did one. I actually went forward to the point of putting trucks on it, and it wasn't square. And that thing, there was no way that car was going to stay on the tracks. So making the part square, if there's something I can say that's important, that's about it. Making those parts square is the most critical thing. Go ahead. I use basswood. Balsa wood is too light and it's too flexible. So I also I had extra wood left over from making the floor or the ends, and I glued it on the inside to add weight to the car. But when you put the sides on, it also gives the sides a little bit more to adhere to. You do want to put a little weight inside that car body. Here's an end view. It shows the car body, but it also shows now the side, where the sides and the roof are going to go on that car body. This body that I just showed you is really inside the car, and you don't see it. You put a side on it and you put an end on it. This gives you an end view to show you the roof, which is going to be a little bit wider than than the slant. So you've got a bit of an overhang, and then the side that goes on. And I use 1 32nd inch thick scribe siding to do this. But also, because this is a Seaboard B3, Seaboard B3s, B4s, and B5s had this overhang on the roof. Overhang's not exactly the right word, but you can see it. I did a little blow up there of what the corner of the side looks like, and you can see that overhang, which is going to be put in there later. Looking at the side, again, while the side is laying flat, mark it out. And you can glue it to the body using Elmer's, or you can I use Duco cement, which I've used forever. I used it on that car I built when I was 14. But don't forget to leave that 1 32nd inch groove at the top. And then there's a styrene strips in the parts list. And you glue that to the bottom, because these cars did have a metal bottom as part of the frame there, or part of the side. Right, I'm jumping ahead there. So now we're ready to glue the side to the body. And we're talking about 1 32nd inch thick scribe siding. And when that scribe siding gets wet, whether you put water on it, or you put Elmer's glue on it, or you put Duco cement on it, it's going to want to warp. And again, you're going to get yourself a Pablo Picasso freight car. So you got to stop that. And so you glue it on, and immediately you firmly attach it to a flat surface. Like I put it against a piece of 1x2 stock here, and pin it down so that wood cannot warp. It's absolutely necessary to do that step. And you do one side at a time and make sure it's totally fastened and dry before you go into the next piece. Now that we've got a basic body lying on the workbench, let's make some parts. That's a boring and repetitive process, but got to do it. You might as well just set some time aside and make the parts before you continue. Then when you're ready for them, they're available. In this particular view, you see some ribs from the sides, you see some roof ribs. You see a coupler release lever up there at the upper right. And now the U-shaped piece is airline retainer clip, which is used to hold the airline in place. So that explains how many certain parts you make. Might as well just have a session doing it. But when you make the ribs on the side, you take this very thin strip of polystyrene, and then you take a half round and you glue them together. So the cross section would look like a top hat. And you're using a plastic cement to do that, which has acetone in it, and it is ultra flammable, and it's dangerous if you breathe too much of it. So always read the safety instructions on the label before you do this, because if you do it in enclosed space, you might be facing unintended consequences. So now we'll detail the side. Do the grab irons first. In fact, it would have been a good idea to mark the grab iron positions while the side was still flat. And what I recommend you do on this, you can get from Tichy Train Group, you can get a template. And it fits against the side of the car, and it has your holes where all the grab irons go. And you use an ordinary pin, and you make indentations with that. And then once you've got the indentations in place, you take your drill, you're going to actually drill a hole in, and then you drill through the side. That gives you a pretty reliable starting point for putting the grab irons on. But then once the side has been glued on, you got to drill again so that those holes now don't just go through the side, that they go into the body so that the legs of the grab iron will fit. So put the grab irons on first and then attach the door, which hopefully you have marked its position before, and then put the vertical ribs in first. And I find the best, I cut make my vertical ribs about 1/4 inch longer than I need. When I put them on, I make sure that that groove is still up at the top, and it doesn't matter how far they extend below the car, because I use a nail clipper. I find that to be the most effective way to get an absolutely perfect cutoff at the bottom of the car that's exactly even with the bottom of the car. So I use a nail clipper for that. Once you've got the verticals in, then you can put the horizontals in. You don't need to measure for them now. They'll just fit. And again, clip them off when you need to. But don't forget that groove. That's the last part of making the side that you do. Draw a bead of glue across the top and fit that in. And that's important as a detail matter for the Seaboard B3 car. If a car doesn't have that and you're building that, it's no big deal. You don't have to do it. I use Duco cement. And so anyhow, they're beginning to look like train cars now. And as you can see from this picture, I did indeed build more than one at a time. So we'll go to the ends. The sides are easier to do than the ends. But do the same thing. That's a Tichy end, and they have little bitty indentations where the grab irons are supposed to go. Drill them out. And later on, when you put the side on the car, but before the grab irons go in, you drill it the rest of the way. The hardest part on this one is the coupler release bar. You've already bent that when you were making parts. But what you need to get is an eye bolt. And I recommend very strongly you find a metal eye bolts. I think Details West makes them. But you might have to look in the Walters catalog or ask at your hobby store. You thread two of these eye bolts onto the coupler release bar, and you drill out the holes. And the instructions I have say exactly where they go. One over the coupler, and one just before you get to the polling pocket. And then you thread the eye bolt, and you insert that eye bolt into that hole. And it's probably about 10 tries per eye bolt. And on a curse word scale, it's probably somewhere between 8 and 10. It's a very tedious process, but once you got it in, it's a good fastening. And that brings to another point, and that is when you put in grab irons, or you fasten the coupler release bar. Once it's in place, put a drop of CA of the really thin CA in there. It flows into the hole and secures the detail to the car. The ladder only has, on the real car, only has 6 rungs. So if you're going to, there's 2 ways to make the ladder. The easiest way is to take a pre-made ladder and cut it to 6 rungs and glue it in, which is how I did it. But Tichy also makes individual rungs if you really want to get detailed and raise your curse word level to 11 or 12. Then you put those rungs in individually. You probably get a better model, but some of these things are not worth the time to do. But then you install everything, well, you don't install the grab irons or those things until you actually glued the end onto the car, because then you're going to have to drill those holes again long enough to accommodate the legs. And then, of course, on the B end, you've got additional detail. You've got the brake, the brake housing and the platform. For the brake staff, I drill a hole right underneath the platform, and I bend that brake staff 90 degrees, and I bend the bottom like a U, so it goes up into the bottom underneath the car, and then the upper part goes into the hole you've drilled, and it stays there extremely securely that way. Here's a diagram of what the underside is look for and how I marked it, and it shows the positioning of the appliances. It shows where your trucks are and couplers are attached. This does not show the sides on the or the ends on the car. This is just the basic body. The Tichy underframe is a fish belly underframe. I actually built one of these cars earlier, and then the material I had to work for didn't say what kind of underframe it was, and I did a straight underframe. Later on, found that was all wrong. And so the motivation to do this particular project was to rebuild that car with proper underframe. And Tichy has a fish belly underframe. And the first thing you do is it comes in 2 halves, and then there are 2 little T-shaped pieces that join it together. Be very careful when you assemble it to make sure that those pieces are in fact perfectly aligned, that the slots on either half are directly opposite each other. Otherwise, you're going to have a crooked underframe. So you assemble the halves of the underframe, and then you drill out. You can go ahead and put the stirrup steps in using the same technique we talked about before, and fasten the 2 halves together. Then comes the fun part. You got to thread that airline through all the cross members and the bolsters, and then cut through the underframe diagonally. So I use fluoresce wire for the airline. which you can get in any florist shop. It is malleable, bends easily, has some springiness to it. And so you can bend to the shape before you do anything, bend to the shape of the airline. And then the next thing you do is you thread it through each of the pieces. And I'll go to the next slide. Overshot. Oh, I got out of place now. There it is. Tichy, in their instructions, they never tell you anything about threading an airline through their underframe system. Now they have the places, they either have the holes pre-drilled or they got a place where you can drill the hole, but they don't tell you how to put it in there. So what you do is the first thing you do is you thread it through the underframe itself. And then you take each one of the cross members and you run it, thread the airline through the hole on the cross member and work it to its position. And then you got to manipulate and manipulate until it comes together. And that can take some doing and some frustration. You start to think it's never going to come together, and all of a sudden it snaps into place. And when it does, you realize that it really makes it. You haven't even put any glue in yet, and it's a strong connection. And each piece you put on beyond that strengthens that connection. So once you've got the underframe with the airline through it, it's really tight and firm as it is. And then you thread the bolsters through it because they have to be threaded also. So you've got to do it now, not later. I start where the airline passes through the underframe and work out from there. So once you've done that step, you can go ahead and glue the underframe and the bolsters to the body. When you do that, I recommend you get a nail that's about the same diameter as the screw for the couplers, and stick it through the bolster and the hole for the coupler, so that you are assured of getting proper alignment. Otherwise, when you screw the couplers in and they're not in alignment, it won't come out right. So always use that to align the bolsters when you fasten them down. And I mentioned the retainer clips. I don't know if you can see them or not. They are right at the very end of the car. If you look at the lower left, you'll see one right next to the coupler. You need to do that because that airline wire is a little bit on the springy side. And that will hold it all in place. The underframe will hold it in place everywhere else. But at the ends of the car, you need something to secure it. That's what they're for. And then you just, I didn't do all the levers, and I didn't do the airlines between the triple valve and all the other appliances. I just decided that it's kind of lifting a lady's skirt. You don't have to, you're not supposed to do that, and you're not supposed to see what's under there. So I just put in the brake rods, which are somewhat visible, but I didn't do the other detail. If you want to do it, there are a number of parts you can buy that would allow you to do it. So guess what? You're just about done, or at least you've almost finished the assembly of the car now, and screw the trucks on. But then I very strongly recommend that you put that on your railroad and run it. The coupler height should be just right the way you built it, but you want to check it with your NMRA standards gauge, and And you want to run it on your railroad to make sure that it's running right. When I did mine, they were happily jumping the tracks, and I had to figure out what wasn't straight and fix it. And now they run perfectly, and they should continue to. But what you have now is this. So it's again, it's beginning to look like something you're glad you built. Painting. The easy answer on this one is that the roofs, the ends, and the sides are all boxcar red. The underside and the trucks are roof brown. And again, if you like to play around with various techniques for weathering trucks, that's fine. They were actually delivered black, but they turn into roof brown in a year or so of operation. So, and the only other thing is to do it right, you make the couplers rust color. Do you brush it on or do you use an airbrush? That's your choice. But I don't do airbrush. I brush mine. And the source of paint is yours. I mean, if we were 10 years ago, I would unhesitantly say use Flocal. But since it's gone, and all the imitations are much more, I don't know, some of them are too thick, some of them are too thin, and you never know how accurate they are. So you got to do your research on painting, and I suspect everyone here who models has preferences. So I'm just saying boxcar red and roof brown, and you can sort that out. So we look at lettering. Tichy has a lettering set that their number is 10184, and it's made to do a Seaboard B5. But it's right. The Seaboard B3, B4, and B5 were basically similar cars, but the B4s and B5s had flat ends rather than the Murphy ends. So you could model those cars too if you can find a source for a good flat end. But the problem with the Tichy set is they're perfect for this car, but you got to do two things. One, you're building a B3. Nobody's ever done that before. So when you show the car off, you want to show that it's a B3. So you need to go, or you want to go through the decal set where they have the little numbers that go on the end of the car and find a number 3 and cut the 5 out of the decal and decal the 3 onto your car. So it really does say it's a B3. And the other thing is that these cars were not repainted after the Seaboard emerged from bankruptcy. So the logo still says Railway. And in order to get that, you gotta Google a company called National Steel Car. They used to be Speedwitch Media. And you got to get a decal set from them, which is a large decal set, and all you need is the logo. But again, if you want to do it right, do it that way. And the other thing is, once you get that and you choose the logo you're going to put on the car, don't get the one where the heart is painted red. Get the one where it's not red. And then you've lettered your car. If there's any one detail that makes a car jump out and look right, it's the lettering. At least that's the way I see it. And that's National Steel Car decal number is D103. Weathering. These cars were heavily weathered, unless you want to model the mid to late 20s, they might not be, but by the end of World War II, they were beat up. This is prototype car is really heavily weathered, but it was, when I found these cars and photographed them, they were already taken out of service. So they were just They were stenciled, do not repair or load on them already. So there were only 4 left when I found this car. So that's why it's extremely weathered. I don't think you want to go that far with it, but you certainly want to weather it well. And everybody has their own preferences about how they want to weather. So I'm not going to spend time. You can choose your own weathering technique. Generally speaking, you're going to have black cinder stain on the roof because of steam era, and in the side weathered pretty much towards gray. There are other opportunities. So we just built a car and talked about the methods involved in constructing that car. Well, this can be extended to other cars, and I put a number of cars out here to demonstrate that. But one that seems to draw a lot of interest is that the one in your upper right picture there that sags in the middle. Truss rod cars, if you didn't tighten the truss rods enough, the car would sag. If you tighten them too hard, they would hump. And I actually did an example of one of each one of those. And here is an example of a body. And again, you can see it in the upper right part of your picture there. But here's a body, and basically what I did, I cut a solid insert and to create the curvature, and then clamp the dickens out of the floor and the roof, and used Elmer's wood glue and squeezed it together and gave it plenty of time to dry. So you can do that, and it makes for an interesting car that will catch people's eye when you visit your railroad. And then on the bottom, you just see other examples of the types of car built using essentially the same technique. And how about that? We are done. And the car is now ready to put into service and earn some revenue for the railroad. And hopefully something that you will enjoy and get the satisfaction of the fact that you made it yourself. Just a couple other points. I brought along what I explained tonight doesn't go into exactly the details you need to build the car. Unless you're taking notes furiously, you miss the dimensions and so forth. I brought along 5 instruction sheets, and these are super detailed and 18 pages long. So if you're seriously interested in doing a project like this, please help yourself. And if you're seriously interested in doing a project like this and there aren't any more of these left, I brought in a sign-up sheet. And if you put the information, put your name and your email address and whether you would like it in PDF or Microsoft Word format, I'll send it to you. And in the same light, I have this refrigerator car here for the Pure Bolt Onions Company. It's not a billboard car. They were in captive service. But I found this to be a really interesting car to do, and I have an instruction sheet for that. So if you're interested in building this car, and I actually made this offer a couple meetings ago, use the sign-up sheet and fill out the information and indicate on that you want the refrigerator car, and I will send you complete instructions on how to do that. In that regard, I have to go and re-edit the instructions for that car, so they're not immediately available, but if I have your email address, you'll get it. And that is pretty much the caboose. of what I was going to say, but I can throw it open for questions. It was taken in Raleigh, North Carolina in October of 1965. Any other questions? Well, thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Harvey. That was really good. You know, you don't get very many scratch building or car clinics, and that it's nice seeing one of those. That's quite a nice boxcar. Make sure you come up and look at these cars he's got up here, and get some handouts. And if the handouts are gone, sign up for some, and he'll email them to you, and that'll work out nicely. And by the way, he's going to do this clinic again for the SER. So if you want to see it again, you know, and see what other tricks you can pick up, that would be good. Actually, the idea of building a kit, that's not a bad idea, because I have a lot of those projects that stopped because they didn't have the parts. So that's a good one. Next month, we're doing something a little bit different. We're going to have a mini swap meet with pizza. So the room's going to be full of tables, the round tables. So bring about 5 items, you know, not just to sit in front of you, you know, you don't bring tons of stuff. And you can buy, sell, swap, whatever you want, whatever items you have. This way you can recycle some of the things you don't need anymore. And the division will be supplying pizza for that. On June 17th, we have a training camp. It's going to be about making fast tracks turnouts. You want to see Perry about that. And of course, I didn't get rid of sharing. Okay. Thank you. And yes. Regular meeting time, 7:00. So don't we have well? We don't have a board meeting, so do we start it early? Well, should we have the meeting at 7 anyway? 6:30. Okay. Yeah, 6:30. Sounds good. Yeah, we'll check the web page. We'll change it to 6:30. Doug will email you. Yes, Doug will keep you informed. 6:30. I have to put it in my notes too. So, does anybody else have any comments, questions, announcements before we adjourn? We do. Model train days. Yeah. Still need some volunteers at model train days at the Southeast Railway Museum. Now, the neat thing about that is, at least last time, you get in free if you're a volunteer, which is kind of cool. So, and it's a lot of fun, and it's in an air conditioned space. Yes. Oh, okay. The Fusion Scale Hobbies, and they have a web page in Cartersville, and they have a web page. So, yeah, fun. Yeah. And anyway, otherwise, I guess we'll see you guys next month. Bring some stuff and be ready to eat pizza.
Pretty working on that.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah.
Good if we can get somebody to deliver it for us. I don't know how many we're going to need, but